Hi, and welcome back to Biblical Theology, Exegesis, and Hermeneutics, where meaning is always context-driven. I'm your host, John Strazicich. Okay, then moving along here, we come here to our structural analysis, and we are still under point B here, Jehovah's historical benefactions to Israel and their disloyalty. So today we're focusing on, it brings us here to the disloyalty unit here that's found in verses 15 to 18. That's point 3 here. So we looked at here under point B, Jehovah's past benefactions, and that concerned the election of Israel from the nations. And that was 7 to 9. And then last time we looked at point 2, which was Jehovah's present and future beneficial care for Israel, and that was 10 to 14. And then now we come here to point 3, and this is Jeshurun's future rebellion against Eloah. And Eloah is just another Hebrew word for God, in exchange for his benefactions, and that's 15 to 18. And there's just 2 points here under this particular unit, and to verses 15 to 18 we'll now turn. Okay, then coming then to our text for today, we begin reading here at verse 15. Vayishman Jeshurun Vayivat Shemanta Avita Kasita Vayitosh Eloah Asahu Vayidnabel Zur Yeshuato Yak Niuhu Betzarim Beto Avot Yak Isuhu Yizbechu Lashedim Lo Eloah Elohim Lo Yidaum Chadashim Mikarov Ba'u Lo Se'arum Avotechem Zur Yiladcha Teshi Vatishkak El Mecholelecha. Okay, so we come now to our translation. And Jeshurun was fat, and he kicked. You were fat, you were thick, you were obstinate. And he abandoned God who made him. He made a fool of the rock of his salvation. They caused him to be jealous with strange gods. With abominations they vexed him. They sacrificed to demons and not to God, gods whom they did not know. New ones come recently, whom their fathers did not fear. You neglected the rock who bore you. You forgot the God who travailed for you. Okay, so that's our translation, and as far as verse 18, you could see this chiastic construction here that it ends with, and a lot of times you'll see that where a unit ends, you can have some artistic, an acrostic to end it, or you could have a possibly a tristic that ends certain sections. But anyhow, so this is our translation and a little comment here on the poetics. Okay, so on this slide we're going to look a little bit more at poetics, and what we're looking at here is the text of the Leningradensis. And we will look at the Aleppo Codex as well, and they both are airing here. This particular text, the Leningradensis, this particular copyist, for sure, he didn't understand the poetics at all, and we already saw that up here, in the first line, Ha'azinu Hashemayim Ba'adab Beira. So he added on to that, Batishma Ha'aretz. I mean, so that should have concluded with Imre Fi here. So this should have been line B, and just this here is line A. So this is continued all the way through, and it really ends badly in the particular text that we're happen to be in now. And you can see here that our text in verse 15 begins right here. Okay, so he has taken verse 15 to be a part of 14, and that he's confusing the poetic lines just like he did up here. So at verse 15 here, we should have a break, and that's just simply because for both of these authors, they understood that there were disticts. Everything was bifurcated, but they had no knowledge of a tristic, that you could actually say, so you could have 3 lines instead of just 2 lines. And you can see here that whether you look at the Aleppo Codex or the Leningradensis, everything is bifurcated just with 2 lines. Now the lines, at least for the Aleppo Codex, the author had a very clear understanding of the balance of lines according to their correspondences. Well, this particular author of the Leningradensis didn't have a clue of that at all. So he just confuses the lines that are grouped together, and you can see that here. And we'll look at the difference in the Aleppo Codex. Okay, so what we're looking at here is this is how the page ends here in the Aleppo Codex, and then this is down here is the next page, and what you'll see here is that this line here, and with the blood of grapes you did drink wine. Okay, so the copyists of the Aleppo Codex connected this particular line with verse 15, and Jeshurun was fat and kicked, and so you could see here that his problem was with this particular copyist. He only knew of disticts. He did not know of tristics. See, with this particular line here, with the fat of the kidneys of wheat, this line here should have went along with this line here, and with the blood of grapes he did drink wine. So these two here should have been the distic. So basically, so that Jeshurun is eating the finest of wheat and drinking the finest of wine. Okay, but the reason why he failed to do that was that he only recognized that there were only disticts, but this last line here, this line here should have made a tristic with this up here. So this would have been, this is line A, this is line B here, and then this should have been line C that went here, okay, with the young of Bashan and goats. That should have been put over here, and you would have had a nice A, B, C. You would have had a tri-stick. And what led him in this error was that only being aware of just disticks. And that's the problem for the particular copyist here of the Aleppo Codex. But he did, so that's where he failed in his lines that begin here at the end of 14 and the beginning of 15. Okay, so much for the formalities of the text so far as we have covered it, following the copyists of the Aleppo Codex and the Leningradensis. So we're going to actually deal with the text itself and its interpretation. So you can see here that beginning in 15 to 18, this is the first indication of the Song of Moses, where we can see that Israel is forsaking God and abandoning Him, and because everything prior to this was how God had fed them. He fed them with the finest of wheat and the finest of wine. We just saw that how verse 14 ended, and they were God made them suck from the curds of cattle and the milk of sheep, and the fat of rams, and so on and so forth, that we saw in verse 14. And it started off, he made them drink from honey from the rock. Okay, we saw that. And oil from the flinty rock. We saw that, I think, in verse 13. So now, when we come to 15, Jeshurun was fat and he kicked. You were fat, you were thick, you were obstinate. Okay? So we're going to look here at verse 15. And Jeshurun is a title for Israel, and it comes from the root yashar, which means to be upright, to be straight, and so the one who is called upright became fat and he kicked, and then this is in the third person narration of Moses, and then Moses goes into a personal address. You were fat, you were thick, and you were obstinate, and then that leads to, and he abandoned the God who made him, and he made a fool of the rock of his salvation, or the rock of his deliverance. So you could see here in verse 15 that this is looking forward in time. We just went straight from that God had caused them to drink honey from the rock and suck the fat of rams and lambs and to partake of the finest of wheat and the finest of wine. And so that section there I entitled the present and future benefactions of God towards Israel, and that's surely what happened in verses 10 to 14. And then when we come to verse 15, now you can see that this is God had told Moses that, look, man, the people of Israel is going to forsake me and they're going to worship other gods. So this is the reason why he was teaching them this song. So in verse 15 is where now you begin to see the prophetic insight that God gave Moses for this particular song, and it was of Israel's apostasy. And look how it begins. It begins with, Jeshurun becoming fat and he kicked. All right. So, when you come into some wealth and you have a lot of money and it gives you spare time, that's when your attention turns from God to you building your own little kingdom. And this was the Deuteronomy chapter 8. Earlier on in the book, it says that, when you've been in the land and you prosper, don't forget God. And that was the purpose of Deuteronomy chapter 8. And that is exactly what that this particular song is about. It's now that they abandoned God. And if you look down here at the very bottom, they neglected the rock who bore them. They forgot the God who, travailed for you. So, by them, you neglected the rock who bore you, and you forgot the God who writhed you, suffered in birth pains for you. That's what this literally means. To suffer in birth pains as a woman gives birth, excuse me, to her child. So this language is used of God, as bearing and as writhing in birth pangs to bring Israel forth, out of Egypt and into covenant relationship with Yahweh, into their own land. And so, it's about neglecting and forgetting. Okay, and neglecting and forgetting, this here, Jeshurun was fat and he kicked. All right, so this is talking about that he's becoming lethargic and he's he doesn't he's obstinate. He does not want to obey what God would have him do. He's rebelling against God's authority. And then personally address him. You were fat, you were thick, and you were obstinate. So you could see, you can see here that these lines are, this is where the true nature of Hebrew poetry, verse 15, does begin new, fresh lines. And we saw how both the Aleppo Codex and the Leningrandensis Codex, those copyists failed to perceive of a tristic. And I don't even want to really get into the Leningrandensis. He's off altogether. But the Aleppo copyist, he knew quite well of distichs. He got into trouble just simply because he didn't perceive that there could be something as a tristic. And if he would have done that in verse 14, he would have been able to produce the tristic and then end it with, that he ate from the finest of wheat and drank from the finest of wine. And that's how verse 14 ends. And that does make a really nice distic that would be appropriate. Because everything before that was dealing with the fat of rams and lambs and curds and milk, and dealt with livestock, and then here at the end of 14 it dealt with wheat and wine. Okay, so to see here that just to notice that each line A has its own unique perspective and a third person perspective, and then in line B, it was focusing on the personal pronouns. You were fat, you were thick, you were obstinate. Okay, so that should be appreciated in reading, verse 15 in the first distich. And then as it progresses, that he abandoned God who made him, or you could say his maker, and he made a fool of the rock of his salvation. So one is talking about abandonment, and the other is making a fool. He's making a mockery out of God who brought him out of Egypt. So when God brought them out by signs and wonders and an outstretched arm, and how did they repay him? With apostasy. Look at verse 16. It gets worse. They caused him to be jealous with strange gods. With abominations, they caused him to be vexed. So both of these here, talk about, making God either jealous or angry, or making him be vexed. And one here is with gods, and the other is with abominations. And this could be, idols. It could be just, their sinful activities, that are abominable, that go along with, worshiping idols. And then it goes on. They sacrificed to demons, right, and not to God. They in gods. Now this is to be understood as small g, gods, whom they did not know. So they're sacrificing to demons and not to Eloah here. God is another name for God, and to gods whom they did not know. New ones come up recently, okay, and it says whom your fathers did not fear. So this is looking back at a little bit of history. This is talking about new gods come up recently, and ones that are so recent that their forefathers, they had no idea of them, nor did they fear them. And it ends here with Teshi, and this most likely is from there is a verb nasa here, nasha here in Hebrew, that means to forget, and it could either be with an aleph or with a hey, and so this verb here looks like it could come from a root nasha here, but it would be related to nasha that ends with an aleph as well, and so you neglected the rock who bore you, and you forgot the God who suffered birth pains for you, and so this is just showing this is the very first introit here in which Moses then is making this accusation, and this is the whole purpose for this song, is to teach them that in the latter days that Israel is going to forsake God, and if you look today, Israel is totally an abomination to God. They're not serving their Messiah. They're not serving Christ. They forsook God. They forsook Christ. and they've been in rebellion, ever since. And thank God they're we're beginning to see, from the 60s, somewhat of a revival of a lot of Jewish people turning to God through Christ, and becoming born again, and coming to know their own Messiah, and we're grateful for that. I mean, we don't want anyone to go to hell, and I do take hell as eternal. I'm not some of these crazy people who think that hell is like the Jehovah's Witnesses. It's it becomes a point where there's an annihilation. It's all just simply because people they're too much talking about the love of God, and God's love for mankind. That's true, but what happened to the devil? So is the devil and his angels, are they gonna be annihilated? No, the scripture doesn't says that he's going to be tormented forever, and hell wasn't made for man; it was made for the devil. But people who don't turn to God, and especially the Jewish people, because they are God's chosen nation, for sure. We saw that in Romans 11. And we'll see that next time, specifically when we get into verses 19 following. Romans 10 actually quotes from our passage. So we'll move on. All right, this has been another session of Biblical Theology, Exegesis, and Hermeneutics, where meaning is always context-driven. Please like, share, and subscribe.